Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? My name is David Jr. here with another Bible lesson, small one. So today I was studying out humility, and I was reading in Proverbs where it says, "Pride before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." And I was thinking about humility, and I was also thinking about boldness and how those two actually go together. Boldness comes through humility, but you can't be bold if you're not humble. Paul was a very bold man, uh, but he was also a very humble man. Moses was a very bold man, but he was also a very humble man. Moses, you know, spoke with God directly on the mountain of Mount Sinai, where Paul met Jesus face to face on the road to Damascus, and both were very humble men, and both men were were very bold. So I was doing some research, and I came across a couple of things. One of the things that I read is in the Bible, being humble is described as a mindset of lowliness, obedience, excuse me, and a recognition of one's dependence on God. It's about valuing others and their needs above oneself rather than focusing on personal gain or pride. Humility also involves submitting to God's authority and acknowledging one's own limitations. Jesus did that perfectly in the Garden of Gethsemane. When he prayed 3 times for God to take that cup away, he was serious. He didn't want to go to the cross. He said, "Father, there's a different way. Let's do it that way." But we all know the story. He gets off his knees and he goes to his disciples, his companions, and finds them sleeping. And he said, "Man, you can't even keep watching with me for 1 hour and pray?" So he goes back and 3 different times he prays, and then finally he just stands up and says, "Okay, here comes my betrayer," and just submitted to God's will. That doesn't mean he wanted to do it, but he wanted to be humble and submit to whatever God had at that time. And that's not easy. That's not easy at all. A lot of times God puts us in situations and we don't want to submit to that trial. We don't want to submit to that. We get the cancer diagnosis and we know what comes with that. We get the turmoil in our relationships, or the troubled child that goes astray. He or she was once a disciple and then goes to college and decides to become cray-cray, And so we have to submit. We have to submit to the trial. We don't succumb to the worries, or we don't succumb to the destruction of the things that trial can bring. Now, Jesus went to the cross, but for the joy set before him, he endured it because he knew that salvation was coming to many people. And Jesus submitted to that because he saw something greater ahead. So when we humble ourselves and we put others' needs above ours in a relationship or in a friendship or whatever the case may be, if the other person is also godly, they're going to take care of your needs, and you will always be taken care of. But even if you don't, even if you are submitting to your family and doing what's right, and the good doesn't come back, God sees it. God sees that your heart and what you're doing. God sees that you're being humble and you're being giving, even if the person doesn't reciprocate, whether it's in a relationship or not in a relationship. Sometimes you're the giver, and the other person, either they are incapable of giving, or they just are selfish. We are required to give to selfish people too. How many times have you and I been selfish with God? God pours his heart into us and we don't pray, or just ungrateful, or we're just unrighteous and we go after sin. Instead of praying, we decide to just curse somebody, or instead of reading the Bible, you decide to look at stuff online you're not supposed to be looking at. Humility and boldness, they both go together. Telling someone the truth in love takes humility. It's not easy to go tell someone the truth. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, but for the most part, there's people that don't want to hear the truth. They don't care about the truth. They don't care. They feel what they feel. They do what they do. And how dare you judge me, Meanwhile, they're driving off a cliff or about to drive off a cliff. You're humble enough to say stop with the very big potential of them just fighting you or embarrassing you. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes they go, wow, man, thank you for warning me about that. If they have a good heart, that's what they'll do. But in some cases, they're just going to be like, who are you to tell me what to do? You don't know my life. Who are you to judge? And all of a sudden, they drive off that cliff, and then they come back and say, why didn't you warn me? I tried to warn you, you didn't listen. It's not easy combining those two. Because a lot of times when we're bold, we're just jerks. We're just jerks. And we can't be that way. Jesus was incredibly bold, but it was incredibly humble. Because he said, what? I do as my Father tells me to do. As the will is done in heaven, so will be done on earth. When he flipped over the tables of the money exchangers, that was bold. But he was humble enough to do it in God's name, and did it because God's name was being defiled at that time. He didn't do it because he was insulted. He did it because his Father's name was being defiled. When he forgave the adulterous woman, the law did say that she had to be stoned. That was the law of Moses. My question was, where was the man? Why didn't they grab the man? Because she didn't commit adultery on her own. The man was there. Maybe she was an easy catch and he just ran away. I don't know. But what did Jesus do? He wrote something in the sand. I'm thinking he wrote the 10 Commandments. That's up for debate. No one really knows what he wrote. There's many people who have their opinion about it. I think it was the 10 Commandments. But what did he say to her? Who condemns you? Well, no one condemns me. But neither do I. But go and sin no more. That's pretty bold to tell someone that. Oh, you tell me not to sin. You're a sinner too. But she didn't do that. She walked away. Now, we don't know what happened to the adulterous woman, if she repented or maybe she was at the foot of the cross saying, crucify him. We don't know. But we do know that Jesus was bold enough to tell people the truth, but humble enough to admit that he did it on God's power. Because when Jesus was on earth, he was fully God, but fully human. Now, our little brains can't comprehend that, but that's what he was. He was the Son of God. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, beginning and the end. That's who he is. And a lot of us, some of us don't believe that, but that's who he is. But he was completely bold, completely humble at the same time. Peter was the same thing. Peter was bold enough to say what he had to say, even if it was wrong and foolish, but was humble enough to accept the correction. Now, I'll end with this. When Peter was with Jesus, when Jesus rose from the dead, and he asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? And Peter said, yeah, of course I love you. And he asked it 3 times, representing the 3 times that he had denied him. Peter, was devastated because he knew what he was, why he was being challenged that way. And but Peter was humble enough to accept the correction. Look, I made a mistake here. Whereas Judas, what did he do? Instead of admitting his mistake and going back to the disciples and said, I betrayed the Son of God, what was going through his mind? Maybe he thought they would kill him, and maybe they thought they would reject him. Maybe he thought that God would never forgive me. I bet you anything, if the story was different, if Judas would have went back to Jesus went back to the apostles. Sorry, went back to the apostles and said, "Hey, man, I sinned against heaven and against earth, and I betrayed the Son of Man." When Jesus rose from the dead, he would have forgave him. He would have forgave him. But what did Judas do? He took the easy way out. He killed himself. You kill yourself, you don't have to face any consequences. Well, I mean, you'll face the consequences of hell if you die the way Judas died because he betrayed the Son of Man and didn't repent. I'm not saying that suicidal people go to hell. I'm not going to comment on that at this video. But Judas was arrogant. He was not bold. He was bold enough to sin, get that money. Then he almost repented. He went back and gave the silver, tried to get the silver back to the Jews, and they wouldn't take it because it was blood money. Well, blood on my hands. And instead of Judas repenting, he just went and killed himself. He bought a field, or they bought the field, and he killed himself. So don't be a Judas. Be humble, be bold, be loving at the same time. It ain't easy. Rely on God's power. That's the only thing you can rely on. This is Dave Chula, out.